Welcome back to American Krishna. On these lives, we go a lot deeper in the reading of the scriptures that I explained briefly on the videos. My name is Cyril, by the way, and again, welcome back. We are reading the Srimad Bhagavatam right now, the story of Ajamila, how this young priest or pastor, supposedly thousands and thousands of years ago, gets involved with a prostitute, debauchery, and then we're getting to his moment of death. We're all gonna die, so I guess this is relevant for most of us. So, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. This is just an invocation in honor of the alleged compiler of the Vedic literatures, including the Srimad Bhagavatam, namely the avatar called Vyas or Vyasadeva. So here we are back at the continuing with our reading, and we are at verse 22. So let me get to that scene right here so we can read it comfortably. Okay, so verse 22 reads as follows. That's 24, sorry, 22. Bandyakshay kaitavas chauryair garhitam vritim astitaha bibrat kutumbam ashuchir yatayam asa dehina. Translation. This fallen Brahmin, Ajamil, gave trouble to others by arresting them, by cheating them in gambling, or by directly plundering them. This was the way he earned his livelihood and maintained his wife and children. So in other words, a condemnation to immoral means of livelihood. Purport. Purport means commentary for those who are here for the first time, and the purport or the commentary here is written by A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, the founder, Acharya as we call him, of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, but more than that, the great theologian, preacher, evangelist who brought the tradition of Krishna Bhakti or devotion to Lord Krishna to the Western world in the mid-1960s. Commentary. This verse indicates how degraded one becomes simply by indulging in illicit sex with a prostitute. Illicit sex is defined as sex outside of marriage. Illicit sex is not possible with a chaste or aristocratic woman, but only with an unchaste Shudra. Shudra meaning the lower caste person, which exists in any society. The more society allows prostitution and illicit sex, the more impetus it gives to cheaters, thieves, plunderers, drunkards, and gamblers. Therefore, we first advise all the disciples in our Krishna consciousness movement to avoid illicit sex, which is the beginning of all abominable life, and which is followed by meat eating, gambling, and intoxication, one after another. So it's interesting how Prabhupada here mentions that sinful life begins with illicit sex, right? And as someone who has suffered from the temptation of watching pornography in the past, I can testify, and I think most of us can testify, that illicit sex is just bad. It brings suffering. Right? If one is married, that I haven't experienced because I'm not married, but someone who's married and who cheats on his wife or cheats on her husband, the suffering is only suffering. The result is only suffering. And Prabhupada mentions here that, from illicit sex then comes meat eating. Now, among the Christian, brothers and sisters out there, meat eating is not considered to be a sin. This is where the devotees of Krishna and the Vaishnava, what's it called? This is where the devotees of Krishna and the Christians, differ. For Vaishnavas, killing animals and eating them is a big sin. It's a big sin. And then intoxication, and then gambling. So these are the four sort of pillars of sin. And any righteous theist who believes in God and who wants to live a life dedicated to God should try his or her best to avoid these four pillars of sin, as we call them, for his own self-benefit. That's the whole point. Like, you benefit when you make an effort to avoid temptation. then your window to God's grace is just more open. More scientifically speaking, you become more influenced by the mode of goodness. If that makes any sense to some of you who are here for the first time, this tripartite model through, or prism or lens through which the devotees of Krishna see the world, mode of goodness, mode of passion, mode of ignorance, and how the mode of goodness or peaceful, as described in the Bhagavad-Gita, you can just look it up, the three modes of nature. When you avoid these four pillars of sin, your life is more influenced by this mode of goodness, and the mode of goodness is a stepping stone or a favorable state of mind and lifestyle to receive more grace from God. Of course, it's not automatic. God is not a robot that will just, reciprocate automatically and mandatorily, according to XYZ action. But still, it's recommended to live in the mode of goodness. So coming back to our text. Therefore, we advise, right, everybody. Of course, restraint is very difficult, but it is quite possible if one fully surrenders to Krishna, since all these abominable habits gradually become distasteful for a Krishna-conscious person. So this is another really important point. Surrender to Krishna. What does it mean to surrender to Krishna? Surrender to Krishna in this age of Kali in which we live in primarily means to incorporate the daily chanting of God's names into your life. It's as simple as that. And in the Krishna Bhakti tradition, especially in the Hare Krishna movement, we chant specifically this mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And by chanting this holy name on a regular basis, one is in effect surrendering, taking shelter of God or Krishna, right? And by doing so, theoretically, if all goes well, if this process actually works, then one is receiving what's called a paramdrishtva, a higher taste. God from within our own heart reciprocates. As he says in the Bhagavad-Gita, in 7:19, if I'm not mistaken, Krishna says, Yeyatamam prapadyante tam sataiva bhajamyaham. As one surrenders unto me, as one takes shelter of me, I reward him, or I reciprocate accordingly. So, as you take shelter of Krishna's holy name, which is considered to be non-different from him, then Krishna or God reciprocates with you, with his love, with his, with his very being within your heart. And then that's why from within your heart you feel that contentment, you feel the, as Christians would say, the presence of the Holy Spirit. You feel God's grace, God's love, and that, in terms of quality of pleasure, is supposedly a much higher type of quality of pleasure and happiness than the not non-existent but paltry, temporary, relatively insignificant. And I'm speaking, I'm not speaking so much from experience here, but I wish I was, but from what Scripture says, of the pleasure derived from sense gratification, from coming in contact with the sense objects, of which sexual orgasm is the highest, considered the highest in this material world. So the idea is like, okay, become attached to Krishna or to God by chanting his name on a regular basis. Try to follow these four principles, and by doing so, if all goes well, if you're not like a jerk with others, and then God should, by his kindness, be reciprocating with you from within your heart, and then that gives you this higher taste, and that higher taste is the motivating factor for you to continue avoiding sinful life, and staying on that platform where you're experiencing the higher taste, right? If illicit sex is allowed to increase in a society, however, the entire society will be condemned, for it will be full of rogues, thieves, cheaters, and so forth. Text 23. My dear king, while he thus spent his life in abominable, sinful activities to maintain his family of many sons, 88 years of his life passed. Text 24. That old man, Ajamila, had 10 sons. of whom the youngest was a baby named Narayan. So he named his son, his latest son, his youngest son, Narayan. Narayan is a name of Vishnu or Krishna or God. Since Narayana was the youngest of all the sons, he was naturally very dear to both his father and his mother. Commentary or purport. The word pravaya saha indicates Ajamil's sinfulness because although he was 88 years old, let me see if I can get a larger, yeah, here we go. This will be easier to read. All right. But let me go back to the verse. Sorry, we're at verse 23, right? So bear with me here, just making it a little bit easier for you to read if you're following at all. Here we go. The word pravayasa indicates Ajamil's sinfulness because although he was 88 years old, he had a very young child. According to Vedic culture, one should leave home as soon as he has reached 50 years of age. Of course, if it's your karma to have a child later on in life, especially within a dharmic marriage, then so be it. Like I know one disciple of Prabhupada, for example, his name is Yadubar. That's the name that Prabhupada gave him when he gave him an initiation. I remember he has a daughter who must be about probably 40 now. And he had a second daughter like 20 years after his first daughter was born. And I remember he was telling me one time, he was like, yeah, some of my colleagues and god brothers, are criticizing me for having had a child so late. He must have been in his late 40s or something, late 40s or 50s. But big deal. Like, what's the problem, right? So, but anyway, let's continue this purport. Prabhupada is saying here, according to Vedic culture, one should leave home as soon as he has reached 50 years of age. One should not live at home and go on producing children. Sex life is allowed for 25 years between the ages of 25 and 45 or at the most 50. After that, one should give up the habit of sex life and leave home as a vanaprastha and then properly takes sannyas. Sannyas means the renounced order of life, right? Vanaprastha means retired life. Ajamila, however, because of his association with a prostitute, lost all Brahminical culture and became most sinful even in his so-called household. Text 25. Because of the child's broken language and awkward movements, old Ajamil was very much attached to him. He always took care of the child and enjoyed the child's activities. Commentary. Excuse me. Here it is clearly mentioned that the child Narayan was so young that he could not even speak or walk properly. Since the old man was very attached to the child, he enjoyed the child's activities. And because the child's name was Narayan, the old man always chanted the holy name of Narayan. Although he was referring to the small child and not to the original Narayan or God, the name of Narayan is so powerful that even by chanting his son's name, he was becoming purified. So that's the point. And that's why, I claim that, you see this especially in Catholic, Central and South American cultures where there's so many people who are called Jesus, right? Jesus or Maria or Jose, important personalities from the Bible. Perhaps there's this underlying motivation there in those cultures too, that, hey, let's be pious, let's call our children Jose or Jesus or Maria so that, we can remember God and Christ and so on by calling our children. And they can also, benefit by being named after those, those divine personalities. Same sort of principle here. And Prabhupada, as you notice here, I'm highlighting it here. He refers to this famous verse, Harer Nama, Harer Nama, Harer Nameva Kevalam, Kalona Sieva Nasieva Katiranyata. Let's go to it. It's quoted in a text called the Chaitanya Charitamrita, but the original source is from, I forgot, it's from some Upanishad or some, original Vedic literature that states Harer Nama, Harer Nama, Harer Nameva Kevalam, Kalona Sieva Nasieva Katiranyata. In this age of Kali, there is no other means for self-realization than chanting the holy name, chanting the holy name, chanting the holy name of Lord Hari. So this really emphatic, famous verse, right? The holy name of God is super powerful. So even if you name your son a name of God, and you never even think of God, but you're just like thinking of your little baby son and how cute he is when he poops or when he walks or when he stumbles or whatever, and you call him out when, well, no spoiler alert. Let's see what happens next. Srila Rupa Goswami, Prabhupada continues. Now, Rupa Goswami, one of the first apostles of Lord Chaitanya, a great saint, a foundational saint in the Bhakti tradition. Srila Rupa Goswami has therefore declared that if one's mind is somehow or other attracted by the holy name of Krishna, tasmat kinapya upayena mana krishne niveshayet, one is on the path of liberation. Let's look this verse up. Let's look this verse up by Rupa Goswami. Prabhupada mentions it in a purport in a commentary to the 7th canto of the Bhagavatam, so we might as well just go to that one. And where is it? He's just mentioning one verse. Oh, it's interesting. Here he says that it's Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur who says that. Another, commentator in the tradition. Let's just look for one. No, it should be Rupa Goswami because he wrote the Bhakti-rasamrita Sindhu, and here's the verse itself. Here we go. This is from, I don't know who translated this, but this translation to this statement, tasmat kenapyupayena mana krishnena veshayet, means therefore, somehow or other one must think of Krishna by any of the favorable methods. Somehow or other. So also the duty of the preacher, or the duty of the preacher, of the evangelist, or the communicator of Krishna Bhakti, his duty is also to, that's why Prabhupada would often tell his followers, rack your brain, or rack your brain, or in other words, rack your brain into finding out what's the best way to spread Krishna consciousness. Somehow or other, the goal is we got to make people chant the holy name of Krishna, right? Or the holy name of God. So whether that means to do it through movies or through, computers or through whatever, streaming services like we're doing here, or whatever it takes, get people, or, giving out free donuts. I mean, Christians are really good at that, right? Like they'll give out free donuts or free pens or, this or that, or they'll even open up schools. I mean, the whole Catholic tradition, we could say, spreads so far and wide around the world by establishing really good schools that, taught perhaps 10% catechism and Bible knowledge, and the rest was just like normal stuff like biology and history and geography and so on and so on. But, hey, if we can plant a few seeds of devotion to Christ through our big endeavor opening schools, it's worth it, right? So that's the whole point. All right, so let's go back to our verse here. It is customary in Hindu society for parents, so not just Hindu society, but as we've seen it in Christian South American communities as well. Oh, what happened here? It is customary in Hindu society for parents to give their children names like Krishna Das, Govinda Das. Das means servant, right? So Krishna Das means servant of Krishna, Govinda Das means servant of Govinda, different names of Krishna or God like Narayan Das and Vrindavan Das. Thus, they chant the name Krishna, Govinda, Narayan, and Vrindavan and get the chance to be purified. The whole point being you get purified when you chant God's names. Text 26. Bunjana, let's just read the translation. When Ajamila chewed food and ate it, he called the child to chew and eat. And when he drank, he called the child to drink also. Always engaged in taking care of the child and calling his name, Narayan, Ajamila could not understand that his own time was now exhausted and that death was upon him, right? That's the thing. Like, what the thing when I say that's the thing, what does that mean? Well, not being afraid enough of death is the common bewilderment of everyone. And that passage in the Iliad or the Odyssey where some character asks the other, like, what is the most amazing thing? No, I'm sorry. That's I'm confusing the Iliad or the Odyssey with the Mahabharata. In the Iliad or the Odyssey, there's this thing like what creature walks with 4 feet and then 2 and then 3? And the answer, like, it's a man, right? You start out crawling on your 4, then you walk with 2, and then when you're old, you're walking with a cane. But in the Mahabharata, in which the Bhagavad-Gita is inserted. If I'm not mistaken, someone asks Yudhishthir, the great king Yudhishthir Maharaj, what is the most amazing thing in this world? What is the most amazing thing? What's the answer? The most amazing thing is that even though there's people dying at every second and are being sent to the court of Yamaraj, to be specific, and we spoke about Yamaraj a few videos ago, the superintendent of death, supposedly, who is kind of in charge of administering karma and, determining the next body, the next incarnation that souls are supposed to incarnate in after their death based on, the good and bad deeds they did in one life. So even though there's people dying at every second, still everybody's thinking, oh, I will never die. And that's the most amazing thing, right? So here the verse of the Bhagavatam sort of echoes that. Like he was all involved in, seeing his boy, time passes by, and now, he couldn't understand that his own time was now exhausted, like death came upon him, and that death was upon him. So commentary. Prabhupada mentions in the commentary, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in other words, God, the Supreme Person, is kind to the conditioned soul. Although this man completely forgot Narayan, he was calling his child, saying, Narayan, please come eat this food. Narayan, please come drink this milk. Somehow or other, therefore, he was attached to the name Narayan. This is called Agyata Sukriti. Although calling for his son, he was unknowingly chanting the name of Narayan. And the holy name of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is so transcendently powerful that his chanting was being counted and recorded. Of course, it is better to chant God's names, as we say in French, en connaissance de cause, knowingly. That's much better, because you're consciously chanting God's names. You acknowledge, okay, now I'm chanting God's name. You accept the existence of God. For God, it's a lot more obviously satisfying and pleasing to know that someone's chanting his name consciously with a conscious desire to become purified and connected to him, as opposed to someone chanting God's name, while referring to his son or while referring to someone else, or by, like for example, you can say, the Ramada Inn Hotel, right? Well, there's the word Rama in there, which is the name of Krishna or God, so you get benefit, but obviously it's not as pleasing. But that's perhaps why Prabhupada is saying God is so kind. He's so kind that, like, look, even if you're chanting my name without even thinking of me at all, still, you're going to get benefit because you're chanting my name. Incredible mercy and kindness and broad-mindedness and generosity and magnanimity of God. Let's read the last verse, text 27. When the time of death arrived for the foolish Ajamila, he began thinking exclusively of his son, Narayan. Purport. And here's a short purport. In the second canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam 2.16, Shukadeva Goswami says, here's the translation, the highest perfection of human life, achieved either by complete knowledge of matter and spirit, by acquirement of mystic powers, or by perfect discharge of one's occupational duty, is to remember the personality of Godhead at the end of life. Somehow or other, Ajamil consciously or unconsciously chanted the name of Narayan at the time of death, and therefore he became all perfect simply by concentrating his mind on the name of Narayan. It may also be concluded that Ajamila, who was born the son of a Brahmana, was accustomed to worshipping Narayan in his youth, because in every Brahman's house there is the worship of the Narayan Shila. The Narayan Shila is a black stone found in Nepal, and which is considered in the river bank of the river Kalikandaki, and is considered to be non-different from Vishnu. It's like a self-manifest avatar of Vishnu. This system is still present in India. In a rigid Brahman's house, there is Narayan Seva, or worship of Narayan through this little stone. Therefore, although the contaminated Ajamil was calling for his son, by concentrating his mind on the holy name of Narayan, he remembered the Narayan he had very faithfully worshipped in his youth. In this regard, Srila Sridhar Swami expressed his verdict as follows. So here's a long Sanskrit statement, which is translated as, according to the Bhakti Siddhanta, or the conclusion of Bhakti, it is to be analyzed that because Ajamil constantly chanted his son's name, Narayan, he was elevated to the platform of Bhakti, although he did not know it. So that's the whole point. devotees go, well, what is the whole point? Like, you go chanting in the street, or let's say, for example, devotees of Krishna like to go and chant publicly, right? Well, they have this faith that if people just walk by, they'll hear the holy name, and they'll be, unconsciously, gradually elevated to the platform of consciously serving and loving God, right? Similarly, Srila Viragava Acharya gives his opinion, translation, although at the time of death he was chanting the name of his son, he nevertheless concentrated his mind upon the holy name of Narayan. Right? So we're getting sort of the confirmation opinion of great commentators to the text here. Another one, Srila Vijaya Dvaja Tirtha, gives a similar opinion. There's no translation. Prabhupada concludes, directly or indirectly, Ajamila factually remembered Narayan at the time of death. Ante Narayana Smriti. Ante Narayana Smriti means at the time of death, Narayan, right? God, Smriti, remembering. Right? So, that's it for today. Again, thank you for watching. Thank you for hearing. Let's have faith that if we could continue hearing this Srimad Bhagavatam and this Bhagavad-Gita together, we get purified, we get enlivened, we are pleasing God, and we're getting, by His grace, the strength to continue chanting the holy name of the Lord, which is, according to the Vedic literatures, the most important process for this age. Until next time, Hare Krishna.